Okay, so today let's take a quick look at the sine and cosine parent functions. Remember the parent function, every function has a parent function, like the square root, or the x squared was the parabola that went right through the origin, and the vertex went right through the origin. So that was, and there was no opening or closing, if you remember, on the parent function of the parabola. Well, now we have two parent functions, sine theta and cosine theta. And you can look at these as functions, f of x equal and f of x equal, and they generate on the graph just like we did for the unwrapping of the unit circle, which created these two functions. So, taking a look at this, some of the questions we want to ask are, what are the zeros of the sine function and the cosine function? Well, if you remember, we started at 0 for the sine, so it touched the 0, so 0, 0. So we had 1 at 0, we had 1 that crossed at pi, and then another one that crossed at 2 pi. And that was the part where it actually started to repeat. And these values here repeated these values here. So keep that in mind too, that that's where it stopped creating new values and started repeating the old values. Okay, so it looks like it's at 0, pi, and 2 pi for the sine curve. Now, on the cosine curve, that's not the case. We do not have a 0, 0. It does not go through 0, 0. So the first part that it hit actually was pi over 2. And then it came down to pi was in the middle, and 2 pi was at the end. And so this was 3 pi over 2 was the other 0. So for the cosine zeros, it's pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Okay, so now we want to know about the maximums. The maximum for the sine function, it looks like it's right here. Remember, on the project, that was the longest piece of spaghetti, which actually occurred at pi over 2. So it was pi over 2 was the max. And there was only one of them in the one complete cycle, so pi over 2. The maximum for the cosine function looks like we have two. We have one right here at 0, and we have another one at the end when we return to the maximum at 2 pi. Okay, let's take a look at the minimums. The minimums would be the lowest part of the graph. Here, this was 2 pi. This is pi over 2. This is 2 pi over 2. So this is 3 pi over 2. And we got to get used to doing that. So the dip, the lowest part, would be at 3 pi over 2 for the sine function. And we only had one on that. We also only have one on the cosine function, but that occurs right in the middle, right at pi. All right, so there we go right there. Now, how long does it take to complete one full cycle? I was talking about that earlier. What we do is we started at 0, we went up, came back down, crossed the x-axis, come back up to the axis again, but we're coming up, approaching it. Here we're coming and just going past it again. So we start repeating the same process right after the 2 pi. So one complete cycle is 2 pi, also known as the period. How long does it take to complete one complete cycle? Same with the cosine. One full cycle. We start out at the maximum, we come down, we make a dip, we come back up, and we come all the way back up to the maximum again. By the time we get up there, we're going to start repeating afterwards. So one complete cycle is also 2 pi. All right, so that should answer most of the questions you need to know about the parent functions of sine and cosine. Hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for watching.